All right, we're going to do another one of these process costing problems. This is a manufacturing facility that actually has a process of products, which is generally characterized by a large number of identical products that are just being produced in an assembly line. So therefore, I really can't track the costs by the job because there is no job. We're gonna track the cost for a period of time, then determine what each unit cost to produce by comparing those costs to the number of units produced. And with that, I can determine what the cost of the number that I finished were and transfer it out. So what does all that mean? Well, let's put it let's see how it all works again. This is the comprehensive problem at the end of the chapter. We're going to work through this, and then we'll go back in the next video and pick up some of the finer points. But it says that this company has a product that passes through two processes, grinding and mixing. And like I said, we're only looking at one department, just one department. So they can say it has 20 departments. Don't let that scare you because we're just going to do the analysis on one. Notice that in this one, we're doing it on the grinding department. It says the information for July is as follows. And they give us a lot of information here, and they want us to produce a process where they ultimately want us to go through the four-step process here to determine what the cost of the items that actually fell off the assembly line were and went to finished goods or went to the next department, whichever way it works. So looking at this, first of all, it looks a little overwhelming. I know it does. And so like I've said in a previous video, the secret to this is really just organizing the information, laying it out so I can see it, and then going from there. So let's see how all these numbers tracked through the general ledger. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pull up the whiteboard that I would normally do in class, but I'm going to put it right here. And I've got the information that we were working with right here. I actually printed it out so we could take a look at it. And what I want to do is I'm just going to lay this out in a format so I can see the flows of the costs. Remember, in accounting, the costs all flow through the inventory account. It starts in the raw materials, works its way over to work in process, to finished goods, and then ultimately to cost of goods sold, to be matched with the revenue that we're going to get. We've got the factory overhead here as well. Factory overhead. Now, what did it actually tell us? I'll break this down by segment. I printed it out, like I said, so we could see it. It said for the grinding department. So it looks like we're going to be looking at the grinding department. It actually said that it has two departments, grinding and mixing. So products are actually going to start like this. They're going to start in the work in process grinding. They're going to get all ground up, and then they're going to transfer the cost down to mixing, where they're going to get more costs added to it, and ultimately that's going to be transferred to finished goods. What we're concentrating on this problem is in the grinding department, So what information did they give us here? Well, they started with raw materials. They said beginning inventory was $100,000. Where does that go? Well, remember, that's raw materials. They said beginning inventory was $100,000. And I'm just going to take all of this and lay it out so I can see what we're working with. It said that raw materials purchased on credit were $211,400. Well, remember from the prior chapter, that's what we do when we buy raw materials. We add it to the raw materials and credit accounts payable. Direct materials used, $190,000. That's direct materials. Indirect materials used, $51,400. That goes down to factory overhead. Just based on material requisition slips, I can see that a total of $241,400 was taken out of raw materials. 190 went specifically to a department, so that department gets charged for it. 551, 400 were indirect, so they go down to factory overhead. And finally, ending inventory was 70,000. So they just put in kind of a table here what happened. It goes on to say payroll. Factory payroll. Direct labor incurred was 55,500. What do we do with direct labor? We charge it right to the work in process account. And if this was a job order cost system, we'd add it to the job cost sheets. We don't have a job cost sheet. Indirect labor incurred. What do we do with indirect labor? I heard you. Factory overhead, 50625. So to journalize this, I would debit work in process grinding department for 55,500. Debit factory overhead for 50625 and credit factory wages payable 106,125. Other factory overhead costs. Well, factory overhead is a total of, well, they duplicated this. They said indirect materials used was 51,400. I already have that. Indirect labor used was 50,625. I already have that. Yeah, they're just telling me again. And the other overhead costs were 71,725 for a grand total of 173,750. With me so far? We're just dropping I'm just putting it in a general ledger format so I can see where everything is. I need factory overhead applied, don't I? I wonder what the rate is. It says factory overhead applied is 200% of direct labor. What's direct labor? 55,500 for this department, so we're going to charge it with 200% of that, which is $111,000. So far, so good? Cool. Okay, one thing I'm going to do, I didn't leave myself quite enough room, so I'm going to, all these cool office things that we have. Drop this down a little bit, and you know this other department is down here. I just need some room to work. Okay, what else do we know? It says that okay, now notice this, that they haven't given me a beginning inventory for grinding yet, but they're going to, they've got to. It says that in the grinding department, the beginning work in process inventory, there were 5,000 units. So at the beginning of the month, we had a beginning inventory, and this was 5,000 units. So I'm just going to put it in blue. This was 5,000 units. And their costs, the beginning work in process inventory costs, were the direct materials were $20,000. And I'm going to do this. It says that the direct labor that's in these units so far from the prior month, the direct labor was 9,600 plus 200% of that for direct labor. I'm going to add the two together because these are the conversion costs, CC. That should say CC. The conversion costs, because remember when we work with unit costs, we work with direct materials and conversion costs. Those two added together are 28,800 for a total beginning inventory of 48,800. So this was my beginning inventory, 5,000 units. And it says that they were 100% complete with regard to materials. So remember, during this month, the first thing we're going to do is finish these. But they're not going to get any more materials. Materials are added at the beginning of the process. They are 100% complete with regard to materials. And they're only 70% complete with regard to conversion costs. I need to take them the other 30% of the way. But as you're going to see, I don't need to know this. I don't need to know that. And you're going to see why in a few minutes. So we know what we started with work in process. We had 5,000 uncompleted units that already had costs of $48,800. Then I added 190,000 because I started a whole bunch more units. Added 190,000 of materials to this department, 55,500 in labor, and 111,000 in factory overhead. So this account now has costs of $405,300 because we started with these 5,000 units that had these costs so far, and then I began a whole bunch more. But recognize that I finished a whole lot of units and transferred them down to the next department to be, what was the next department? The next department was mixing. There's not 405,300 of costs still here, but there are some units still here, and I need to know what the ending inventory cost is of this total 405,300. How much is going to be assigned to the units that are finished and left my department, went to the next department, and how much is going to be assigned to the units that are still here uncompleted? Well, in order to know that, I need to know how many units were done and how many units were started and that kind of thing. And they have to tell me that. They tell me that the units started at this period were 20,000. So I began on the first of the month. When I turned on the lights, there were 5,000 units here that I needed to finish. And during the month, I began 20,000 brand new ones. Units transferred to the mixing department, I finished 17,000. So how many are still in ending inventory? If I started with 5,000 and I started from scratch another 20,000, that's 25,000 units to account for. How many units? And so out of that 25,000, 17,000 are done and gone. That means that there are 8,000 units still here. And they told me that right here. So this problem actually gave me all four numbers. Most do not. But this one did. It did tell me that I started with 5,000. I began another 20, finished 17, and I still have 8. Now these 8,000 units, they are 100% complete with regard to materials because materials are added right at the beginning of the process. Regardless of how far along, how far converted they are, they have all their materials. But they're only 20% converted. That I need to know. I need to know the percentage completed in the ending inventory, not the beginning. So what do I do then now? Here's my issue is I need to know how much of this cost, this 405,300, what's the cost that I'm going to assign to those 100 or 17,000 that are gone, and therefore what's the remaining cost? How much am I going to assign to these 8,000 units that have all their materials but only 20% converted? That's the question. And I really can't figure this out till the end of the month until I get all my costs for the month and I figure out how many units I finished and how many are still here. But now we're going to prepare a production cost report that actually puts this all together. Puts it all together. So how are we going to do that? Okay. Now that I have an idea of what. Sorry about that. Better turn off my phone. Okay. Now that we have an idea of what all of this means, by laying it out like this so I can see where everything was and everything seems to be working out nicely, I need to do a production cost report for the work in process account so I know how much to transfer out. Again, we're going to lay it out in something like this. Oops. Do it this way, bring it back this way. This is the same thing I did by hand yesterday, or in the first video. And just so we can see this, I'm going to put this right up here so we can see the whole thing. Okay, so now, what am I going to do? Let's see, let me drag this over just a, move this over just a tad. Oh, shoot. Hang on. Okay, so now I'm looking at all the activity in my production cost report that we did, and I'm trying to calculate how much to transfer out and how much cost to leave in ending inventory. So we're going to do this. I'm going to start. Step one is to get a handle on the physical units, and the physical units are these right here. How many units do I have to account for? Beginning inventory plus what I began, and where are they now? How many have I finished and how many are still in process? Well, that's what we calculated, or that's what they told us. They told us every one of them. It says that we started with 5,000, and I actually started 20,000 for a total physical units to account for of 25,000. Where are they now? Well, I finished 17,000, and there's still 8,000 here for a total of 25,000 accounted for. These have to match. These are what I've been charged with to account for, and here's where they are now. Second, we want to calculate equivalent units of production, and remember that's done right over here on the side. We do an equivalent units for direct material costs and equivalent units for conversion costs. But I have to drop in the percentage complete of the ending inventory here. Remember, they told us, and they have to tell us, direct materials are 100% complete because every unit gets its materials right at the start of the process, so it's got a full material charge regardless of how converted it is, but they're only 20% converted. So now let's compute equivalent units of production. Well, the 17,000 units that are done, they do represent 17,000 units with regard to materials and with regard to conversion costs. They are done. But the ending inventory, the 8,000 that are in ending inventory, with regard to materials, they are 100% complete, so they represent 8,000 units. 8,000 times 100%. But with regard to conversion costs, they're only 20% complete. So 8,000 units, 20% complete is the equivalent of 1,600 fully completed units. Now let's add these up. Just adding these up, we have a total equivalent units for material costs of 25,000. Notice that when materials are added at the beginning of the process, these will always be the same, because regardless of whether they're done or not quite finished yet, they all have all their materials. Conversion costs, this only adds up to 18,600. So there's a total of equivalent whole units of 18,600. That was step 2. This is step 2. Again, we needed to know what the percentage complete in ending inventory was. I didn't need to know the percentage complete in beginning inventory because I don't work with beginning inventory in computing equivalent units of production, only finished and ending inventory. Now third, let's drop in the costs, and those costs are the very same costs that I have right here. Beginning inventory had direct materials of 20,000, and it had indirect or conversion costs, and they gave it to us in labor and overhead, but we don't necessarily need to have that. Total beginning inventory was 48,800. And that's what it said right here in the problem. Direct materials were 20,000. Conversion costs were 28,800 for a total of 48,800. Current manufacturing costs, that's these, what I added this period. 190,000 in materials, 55,500 in labor, and 111,000 in manufacturing overhead. I'm just going to sum these guys up to get a grand total of, I better not do it that way, equals this plus this, 405,300. And notice that's what this is, 405,300. That's what I'm trying to allocate. These are my costs. That's not supposed to be there. These are my costs, 45,300 to account for, because this is what my department was charged. I started with 48,800. I was charged 190,000 for materials and labor and overhead. So I've got 405,300. I want to know how much of that 405,300 is going to be assigned to these 17,000 units completed, and how much of it is going to be assigned to the 8,000 that are in ending inventory. That's what I'm trying to figure out. And I do that by coming up with a per unit cost, and I need a per unit cost for materials and one for conversion costs. So let's start with materials. Materials. Well, here's my two material costs, and I'm going to kind of color code it so maybe you can see what's going on. We'll make this one purple. There's my two material costs. I have a total of 210,000 in materials. 20,000 plus 190. 210,000. And how many equivalent whole units did I produce for materials? 25,000. That comes out to be $8 per unit. Or no, $8.40 per unit. 210,000 total material cost divided by total equivalent units of production for materials. $8.40 per unit. Let's do the exact same thing for conversion costs. Here are my conversion costs. What I started with. What color do you like? How about, I don't know, maybe that's kind of a pretty, well, that's kind of like that color. Let's say, how about, I already have green. Let's go with that one, a little bit darker. There's my three conversion costs. Let me add them up. Plus this, plus this, plus this. Total conversion cost, 195,300. And for 195,300, how many equivalent whole units did I produce for in terms of conversion costs? 18,600. That's a total of 1050. So, in total, one whole unit cost how much? $19 to produce. Nope, $18.90, that was rounded. So, yeah, $8.40 for materials in each unit, $10.50 for conversion costs. So every unit cost this month cost $10.90 to produce. This is step 3. Now I have my per unit cost. That's step 3. We are in the home stretch now. Step 4 says what? Well, let's use these unit costs to figure out how much the 17,000 units cost that are done and the 8,000 units that are still here. I'm trying to allocate this 405,300 to those two. Well, this is the easy one. We have 17,000 fully completed units, and one fully completed unit cost $18.90. 17,000 times $18.90. They should cost $321,300. So I guess the other 80,000, 84,000 should be assigned to the ending inventory, but let's not plug it. Let's compute it. Let's start with materials. How much material cost is there in these 8,000 units? Well, one whole unit has $8.40 of materials, and how many whole units with regard to direct material costs do they represent? 8,000. So the material costs in these 8,000 units that are not quite converted yet is $67,200. Every one of them has all of its materials. So $8.40 times 8,000. How about the conversion costs? Well, one whole unit has $10.50 of conversion costs. How many whole units do these 8,000 represent in terms of conversion costs? 1,600. They have the same costs as 1,600 whole units. So the conversion costs in these partially completed units is 16,800. So it looks like the total cost of ending inventory, direct materials and labor, is 84,000. So now, have we accounted for, by computing both of them, look at that. Look at that. It balanced, which means now I know that I need to make a journal entry to do what? I need to transfer 321,300. That's what this number is. Make a journal entry to debit the next department for the 321,300. And when we take the 405,300 minus 321,300, what balance will it leave? 84,000. And this production report tells us everything that we need to know. Tells us everything. Now I'm going to put this blank copy, I'm going to put it on Excel, or on Canvas, sorry. I'm trying to think here. I'm going to put it on Excel for you so you can print it out and use it. I think it'll speed things up a little bit. But I also wanted to show you something else. If you want to, and this is a good learning process for you as well. Good learning process. Did you notice how I was putting in a lot of formulas? Did you notice how I was doing that? Actually, all we need in here, the only inputs that we need in this whole thing are what's in white. So let me show you how this would work. This has all the formulas in it. So if I know, it's the exact same problem. I'm just going to say, as far as the units go here, we began with 5,000 units. I started 20,000, finished 17, still have 8 that are 100% complete with regard to materials, 20% complete with regard to conversion costs. Already computed the equivalent units of production. Drop in the costs. Beginning inventory was 20,000 for materials, 28,800 for conversion costs. Current production costs, 190,000 for materials, 55,500 for labor, and 111,000. Boom. Oh, something's wrong. 111,000. And it's done. What? Yeah, it's done. If you want to take the template that I'm loading on Canvas and put in the formulas, it will help you to determine where numbers are coming from. For example, all I had to do was put in what was in white. That was it. Well, how did it get this number? Or how did it get this number? Oh, it's protected, so what I have to do, I have to go to Unprotect the Sheet. Okay, so now, how did it get this number? It was this times that. How did we get this number? Notice what it does. It was this, the number of units, times the percentage complete. where did this total cost number come from right down here? Oh, so these two added up. Well, where did this direct materials equivalent units of production come from? Oh, it's right there. Well, where did this total conversion cost come from? Oh, it's all these guys. It's this one plus those. Well, where did this number come from? Oh, it was that times that, the equivalent units of direct materials times the direct material cost. Well, where did the conversion cost come from? Equivalent units in ending inventory of conversion cost times the whole unit conversion cost. And it actually works. This is what you're going to make your journal entry for. I need to transfer this cost out of this department to the next department, and if I'm the last department, to finished goods. So try to put in the formula, see if it'll work. And if these numbers don't match, because this is what you have to account for, and I'm trying to figure out how much of this number do I leave here, and how much do I transfer out. That's the whole chapter. It took about a half an hour, 31 minutes. So, well, we're going to do a couple more, not in this video, but I'll load a couple more videos over the days. We're going to go back and pick up some of the highlights in the next video on the chapter, and then we'll do another problem. And so keep working on it, keep looking at it, and understanding where these numbers are coming from, keeping in mind what it is I'm trying to calculate. I'm trying to calculate how much to transfer out of this department for the units that are done and gone. So anyway, hope you're having a great day, and we'll catch up with you in the next video.